Greetings and salutations. A train derailment occurred on February 3rd, 2023 at 8:55 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, when 38 cars of a Norfolk Southern freight train carrying extremely hazardous materials derailed in East Palestine, Ohio. Several rail cars burned for more than 2 days, and eventually emergency crews then conducted what is called a controlled burn of several rail cars at the request of state officials. This released hydrogen chloride and phosgene and other harmful contaminants into the air. Only the residents living within 1 square mile of the burn site were actually evacuated, but just 2 days later, they were told it was safe to return home. Safe? That's what they said. But is it really safe? Initial testing of the water was conducted by a third-party contractor hired by Norfolk Southern. However, the tests were conducted in a way that did not comply with EPA testing standards. So what about the EPA? What did they say? Well, the EPA said that their own testing said that the air and water near the crash site was safe. However, some independent researchers from Texas A&M using the same data found elevated levels of some 9 pollutants or contaminants that can lead to long-term health problems, including cancer. It's important to note that the EPA has a terrible track record of just showing up at a disaster site, rushing to say that there's no problem, and then they leave the communities without any support. It happened in Manhattan after 9/11, it happened in Flint, Michigan, and it appears to be happening here as well. East Palestine residents have filed multiple lawsuits against Norfolk Southern. However, the courts move incredibly slowly, and it will likely be years and years before we see the results of those lawsuits. But even if they lose every court case and pay some settlements, it's likely that this will not affect them. This company apparently treats payouts for destroying whole towns as routine and just the cost of doing business. They've done it before. In 2005, Norfolk Southern fought accountability for another equally devastating and dangerous disaster that they caused in South Carolina. That disaster killed 9 people and left over 500 people hospitalized. What was the cost of the disaster? Well, for Norfolk Southern, it was a very small price to pay. They paid $4 million in government fines and $10 million in settlements to residents. But that is a very small fraction, most experts say, of the funds that it would actually take to really cover the harm that they caused to that community, its residents, and its ecosystem's long-term future. So they just paid $14 million for the last town that some would say that they completely destroyed. All those lives lost, health lost, and suffering of its residents. $14 million is nothing to a $55 billion company. It's like you or I having to pay a $25 traffic ticket. It's a slight annoyance, but it's just not a big deal. Norfolk Southern is a $55 billion company. And what's really sad is that this latest environmental disaster, as well as the human health disaster that they created in East Palestine, will barely affect them. I checked, and it seems as if their stock price hasn't taken a huge dive. In fact, I talked to 2 separate stock market brokers who told me that right now would be a great time to buy their stock during this slight dip it just took. But both these stock market professionals predicted that the stock price will be back to a higher than ever price per share in the next quarter. Here, we have some drone footage showing some of the early cleanup efforts in East Palestine, and company officials assured everyone since this began that the air and the water were safe. New independent studies are starting, and some of them may show that Norfolk Southern and others were incorrect in their previous statements. It's hard to tell just what the long-term effects will be on the air, water, plants, animals, and especially the people who live in that area and have chosen to continue living in that area long-term. I'm not an environmental scientist, so I can't explain to you how the EPA and Norfolk Southern can assure everyone that the water in the air is safe when more than 43,000 animals, most of them fish, have died in and around East Palestine, Ohio. Are all these dead animals not a sign of hazardous chemical agents in the air, water, or soil in their environments? The proverbial canary in the coal mine? And one might ask themselves, if this environment is killing thousands, no, tens of thousands of animals, how can that very same environment that is killing off all these animals somehow be completely safe for humans? The truth, the sad truth, is it can't. It's not safe. And signs of that are emerging in full force. Local residents in East Palestine, as well as in surrounding towns, are reporting major health problems, and many are being diagnosed with chemically induced bronchitis or contact dermatitis due to chemical exposure or other serious ailments. The doctors making these diagnoses are attributing the causal factor to being the environmental disaster. There is a rush by some to say that all those reports are unrelated health problems somehow. So I wanted to talk to some local residents and get the real story. After our first report on this, I got many emails, and this interview I'm sharing with all of you is just one of the many local residents that I talked to. There's a lot of people reporting massive health problems that live in or around the area. Norfolk Southern has sent local residents a mailer recently claiming that there have been no health risks detected by any tests conducted by the government or independent labs. I think it's incredibly important to take careful note that the narrative that we are being spoon-fed is being completely disputed by local residents and local doctors. Most there don't think that the air or water is safe, and many feel like Norfolk Southern and even our own government has been lying to them. So let's get to an interview with a local resident whose name is Jason Van Hoos, and hopefully we'll get some clarity on these events. I have been interested in this event since it took place, and I've been following some of the news coverage, but I thought it would be more informative to get someone who actually lives there who can tell us what's going on in the ground and in the surrounding cities and neighborhoods and towns, and that would be you.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I live in Youngstown, which is about 20 miles north of East Palestine. And
okay.
I've had a lot of involvement with that area, the East Palestine area, because my mom lived down there for 40 years and had a big antique business. So I've just spent a lot of time roaming around the countryside, going to farm auctions and flea markets and things.
Yeah, I know that area. Interesting area. I used to know somebody who had a cabin on the like border of PA up there, right near there. So I know the area pretty well. Can you tell me what's really been going on the ground there? What are the local residents talking about? What impact is this event having on the locals or people who live near the event?
Well, right now, I haven't been down to East Palestine in person because I've been sick from the fumes from the disaster that made it up to Youngstown. But I've been in contact with people I know down there, via the internet and messaging and things. And there is some really deep concern going on. This seems to be affecting people with underlying conditions and the elderly, and there's great concern for the kids.
Yeah, that's what I've heard, that it's affecting the vulnerable part of the population a lot, like other things would, like children and older people. maybe very young children don't have that developed immune system yet, and older people's is weaker. So do you think it's affecting them more dramatically than a younger, healthy person?
I think so. But at the same time, there's so many people doing on the ground interviews that are saying that they've all been treated for acute bronchitis due to chemical exposure. There's been a number of people who've been hospitalized, put on oxygen, and they say that, they're young people, they're healthy, they work outdoors, they work on farms and things, and here they wind up in the hospital. And there's even been instances of kids who've been athletic kids in their schools who just knocked out, put on oxygen, put in the hospital for several days. There's so many mixed messages coming in. There's so many people standing up and saying, "Hey, there's nothing wrong here. We're fine. We're healthy."
Yeah, and isn't it crazy that they only evacuated 1 square mile around the original, derailment and fire that they created? Only evacuated 1 square mile, and what was it, like the next day they just told everybody, "Oh, it's safe to go home."
Right, that's true. And on top of that, there's people who went back to their homes, told it was safe, and then they had testing done. Testing comes back, says, "Oh, you're safe." Well, and then a follow-up test was done because somebody got sick in the home, and they said, "Oh, yeah, don't go back. Stay out of your home." This has happened several times. So people don't know what to do. So one house will get, kind of like a don't go back in order, but the house next door, everything's fine, so they say.
Yeah, and that does not make any sense. If it's hazardous for your next door neighbor, it's hazardous for you. And there does seem to be this mixed message, right? And is your perception and other people's perception around there that this is being covered up, or that the people responsible are trying to avoid responsibility, so they're just saying, "Yeah, everything's fine," knowing that it's not?
Well, honestly, I have some background in the sciences. I spent 2 years at Ohio State in environmental science, things like that.
Well, I would say that makes you qualified to make some calls here and determinations about what's going on, more so than me or the average citizen.
Yeah, it was a long time ago, but to me, I look at this and I think they're realizing that this is a bigger disaster than they could admit to. That seems to be the direction it's going. Like recently, they've been saying that the air's fine. Well, we have many local universities, including Carnegie Mellon. A variety of universities have gone there and tested, and they're finding chemical levels that are too high. So you get this message from the Norfolk and Southern testing facilities saying it's fine, and then the Ohio EPA saying it's fine, but then the universities are saying no, these chemicals are getting too high for comfort, and they say long-term exposure to those chemicals will cause all kinds of health issues.
Yeah, so that's the scary part. Yeah, that this is going to affect some of those. If those local residents just choose, especially the ones closest to this situation, where the water's getting infected with these chemicals, and the air, you're going to have acid rain coming down for God knows how long, months maybe, from the burn. So there could be like really long-term health effects. And 10 years from now, we might find huge pockets of cancers and things like that from this event. And I would think that the train company is going to try to minimize this as much as possible to prevent the liability and the payouts.
Yeah, well, I think we're looking at a situation where Norfolk and Southern is going to have to go completely bankrupt. I think it's that bad. And I think it's a day of reckoning for major industries. But at the same time, the petrochemical business is huge in that area, in that stretch of along the Ohio River.
Yeah.
They just put a huge cracker plant in. It's like some sci-fi nightmare on the side of the mountain. And that thing is, all that waste has to go somewhere.
Yeah.
It's, it's just such a horrible situation. It's scary. Like for us, it's a true apocalyptic nightmare. I mean, that massive plume, I'm still having nightmares about that plume of fire and smoke.
Yeah, God knows what's in it. And then wasn't there been reports that there was more chemicals than they originally released were on that same train or burnt off as well?
Oh, yeah.
So it seems like the narrative is slowly getting worse, despite their best efforts to conceal it or to minimize the damage.
Right. And to me, it seems like their goal is to buy as much time as possible, to just information in the public hands is Norfolk and Southern's worst enemy.
Yeah. Yeah, a well-informed populace is a dangerous one, I believe that. But what can you tell us about the creeks, the rivers, the local lakes and ponds, and all those dead fish and things that we were seeing early on? Has that continued to be an issue or gotten worse or gone away?
Well, it's a mixed bag. In a lot of areas, well, first of all, they said originally that there was 3,500 fish killed in the closest creek, and that was it. Well, those numbers have changed, and the Ohio Department of Natural Resources now admitted that 44,000 fish have been killed.
44,000 fish. That's a big swing from 3,500, isn't it?
It's a huge swing. And other universities have come in and confirmed this. In addition to that, the fallout to the north, poisoned ponds, and there's at least 2 ponds that I heard of where all the fish were killed from the fallout, from the dust and ash coming down.
Yeah, and we're talking about all the fish in the entire pond or lake. That's quite an event, It's not like a percentage of it. It's like they basically, I've seen some footage from other locals, and they basically have to go in and just sweep all the dead fish out of an entire pond or lake or fishing pond, whatever. These waterways are all getting hammered. And don't you think it's like a canary in the coal mine situation? If you're seeing 44,000 fish dead, that may be some indicator of what's actually going on in the environment, more so than these false reports that everything's fine, go about your business, right?
Yeah, that's true. And this is and it's making matters worse because the officials are saying, don't believe your own eyes. Believe what we're telling you. And so it really creates this unsettling sense of paranoia in people.
Yeah, and I don't know. I have no patience or even allowance for like corporate greed being more important than people's health. This is such a failure of every system or checks and balances that you would think in our I would expect something like this in a third world country someplace. But the fact that like a corporation is just able to come in and then the government is backing them up, essentially saying, oh yeah, everything's good. I know Ohio EPA has been trying to calm the pardon the pun, the fires of this thing, right? And we've got, Biden is giving, just gave $10 million to Ukraine. Is it true that he refused to designate it a federal emergency?
Well, yeah, more or less.
Amazing.
There were some complicated bureaucratic things going on where our governor there was it's so complicated, Steve. It's hard to explain the whole bureaucracy. I'm afraid I'd just bore your listeners.
Mm-hmm.
But there was essentially, I wouldn't call it miscommunication, but malcommunication between Governor DeWine and the federal EPA, Joe Biden.
Sure.
And it took him a week to just sort through what the misunderstandings and things like that. So the horrible part of this is action should have been taken immediately after the disaster, but it's only now taking place, and it's been almost a month.
Yeah,
a month.
30 days. They just left those citizens on their own to fend for themselves. Hope you don't die of mustard gas poisoning in the next month while we figure this out. It's just been, like I said, I think this has shown like a system-wide failure of so many systems that we thought are in place. The transportation system fails, the federal government fails, the EPA. I'm calling them for on the record comments, and they don't want to reply. They don't want to respond, and that bothers me because that's their job. They're there to do that, and every state EPA agency has a media person whose responsibility is to be the spokesperson for them and to answer questions. They don't want to do that. And I haven't seen something like that before, not as blatant as I'm seeing it right now, but I'm keeping call logs because eventually I hope that people are called before somebody to answer for their lack of response here. If I'm calling the Ohio EPA and asking for comment about different issues or statements that citizens on the ground are sending me and they refuse to even return a call, that's a huge problem. So why can't you answer questions? Is it because they don't want to, or because they can't? Who knows? But it's a real problem, and there should be major accountability for this stuff.
Right. Part of the problem we're facing here is that we have the Republicans are running Ohio, and Norfolk and Southern has been contributing to their campaigns.
Yeah. And I saw a lot of blame placed on Trump for easing some kind of regulations, but we've got Biden forcing the railway workers back to work, not letting them strike when part of the reason they were striking is over safety concerns. Did you know that when a train leaves a destination with a full, whatever it has, 100 cars or, all filled with whatever, hazardous materials, whatever it's filled with, some of these rail workers only get 90 seconds per car to check each car for safety. And, that's ridiculous, especially when you're dealing with, these kind of hazardous chemicals. 90 seconds, that's what you get. And they have to go through that 100 car train, and they get 90 seconds per car to check the entire thing. That's ridiculous.
And those tanker cars carrying that polyvinyl chloride, that stuff it's one of the most toxic, most flammable substances on Earth. One of the most ever created by man. It is so horrific that if a few little things go wrong, you suddenly have a massive bomb on your hands, like an incredible explosive toxic device. And they're hauling these things still right through your community. If you got a railroad track going through your town, they're hauling that stuff right through your town.
Yeah.
And it's just like they're bringing these bombs right into our towns.
Well,
and
they're
so fragile.
Yeah, that one sure turned into a bomb.
Well, there was 500 tons of polyvinyl chloride. 500 tons of that stuff was being hauled.
Yeah.
Each one of those has such powerful explosive potential. That was the big reason they had to do that so-called controlled burn, because if they would have let it gone a little farther, they said it would have turned into an unimaginable catastrophic event.
No, I think it was bad enough as it was, but yeah.
Well, it would have if they hadn't directed the energy as they did, it would have flattened that whole town. It literally would have, and that's not an exaggeration. This is what the experts are saying. They're saying shrapnel would have fallen like miles away.
Yeah. And besides the dead fish, I'm hearing various reports of people's pets dying, their chickens, their dogs, their cats. Are you hearing a lot of that?
Yeah. It's sort of like, well, there's been a lot of chickens. There was one calf that was, we're still waiting to hear the final report. Yeah, there were a lot of animals have just gotten sick. It's been farmers talking about their chickens stop laying eggs, or the cows won't get up and move around, stuff like that. And the thing is that this is kind of a cumulative effect. And so as these weeks have gone by, it's getting worse and worse. It's not getting better, but it's slowly getting worse, and it's definitely not getting better. Like, there's no signs that I can see from any news reports that there's any sort of improvement. But these very scary reports keep coming in at a steady rate, and it's just, it's getting to the point where we're expecting to see animals start dropping dead soon, or people's health getting worse. There was a big factory down there, very successful pet factory that pays very well. They make ceramic bricks for heavy industry. They had to shut down because every time the workers lived in the countryside, and when they come into town, they get sick. And this has been going on for 3 weeks. So finally, in our local business newspaper, they said they're just closing the factory because they can't keep workers in there.
Yeah, and I saw that news report. I'll share it for my audience. But just horrific, this stuff that's going. And you're right. If you're in a situation where there's some kind of toxins in your environment, those toxins build up in your system over time. It doesn't get better. It gets worse the longer you were exposed to this.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you said that there's all kinds of people being hospitalized or seeking medical treatment for, I'm hearing like bad sore throats and sort of like allergy conditions,
Right.
Running eyes, bad sore throats, skin irritations, rashes. Are you hearing similar things?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's sort of, it's sweeping the area. I didn't know that there was, when they did the controlled burn and the toxic plume came over Youngstown, the officials did a very poor job of notifying people. So I went out to my art studio to work. So I was out in it. And by the time I got home, I was so sick. And it just kept getting worse and worse. And I was diagnosed with acute bronchitis that was probably brought on by chemical exposure, according to my doctor. And I had allergic rhinitis and inflammation. I mean, it was brutal. And then he told me I had it so bad, and since it was probably chemical related, it was going to take me 3 months to recover without treatment. 3 months. So the treatment he gave me was a steroid shot. And this is what I just explained, what I was diagnosed with. All these people between East Palestine and Youngstown are getting diagnosed with that, and they're all getting the steroid shot. So when you see these people interviewed, like in East Palestine, and they're all happy, it's because they're all jacked up on steroids.
Great.
Just keep that in mind when you watch the videos.
Great.
So, I mean, It's pretty crazy that all these people are in there these steroids are powerful. Wow. But this is what it takes to knock it out of your system, these reactions have been so severe. This is just not like ordinary allergies, man. It's severe because what they say, a lot of what we were exposed to was that World War I chemical called phosgene, and it was used as a chemical weapon.
Yeah, it's the main ingredient of mustard gas that was used during World War One.
Right. I mean, it's brutal. It's meant to kill people. So even a small dose.
Yeah. And it's important just for my listeners to make sure they understand that, you know, when this vinyl chloride was burned, when you burn that chemical that was in the tankers, it creates this other chemical called phosgene, which is the main component of deadly mustard gas used during World War One. And I think, wasn't it outlawed by the Geneva Convention to use that as a weapon because it's just so terrible, right?
Oh,
but they could somehow just burn this vinyl chloride and create it in the atmosphere and possibly kill a lot of people with it. Because, hey, we got to get, you know, the other thing I heard is that they did the burn and everything because they had to hurry up and get the railway running again. That's crazy. Like, oh, you know, we have to get the railway running, so do what you got to do. And then I heard that there's reports they were supposed to remove the soil around the actual derailment, but they didn't. They just covered over it. Do you know anything about that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's really corrupt. They had they had that railroad fixed and running so fast. It's amazing. There's trains just blasting through East Palestine every 11 minutes, and it's two tracks. So they're going north and south every 11 minutes, man. They picked up, because they lost so much time, they had to make up for lost time. So they're really running them trains hard now.
Oh, that's great. Maybe have a second one.
There's all those chemicals in the rail bed. And so every time a train goes over, it kicks up all that dust, and everybody gets their issues get reactivated.
Yeah, you're getting exposed to it a secondary time, a third time. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I just don't understand. And what is the attitude in general of the local residents? Are people like angry and feeling like lied to or betrayed, or are people just accepting the you know, the sort of propaganda that everything's fine, go about your life?
People are still in a state of shock, and they're dealing with, you know, so many issues just to make it through a day that they haven't even been able to get together enough to fight. You know, I don't think some people are getting mad, but I think people are just so confused and exhausted and demoralized. At least the people I talk to, you know, like it's overwhelming. You know, when you're down here and it's every day, it feels like an overwhelming disaster, like similar to like when a big hurricane hits and how people kind of walk around in shock for a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But when the hurricane hits, FEMA's right there. They're getting help. They're getting counselors. They're getting all this help. It's only just now getting there to East Palestine.
Yeah. And do you have any
trauma? There's no trauma therapists down there, as far as
there
I
should
know.
be.
The government always sends them in.
There should be. Yeah. And do you have a sense of how far out are these toxic effects being felt from the original derailment site and burn site? Do you have any idea of, you know, how far are these toxic effects traveling?
Well, as far as I can tell from the internet and talking to people, we have people, like I'm 25 miles away, almost due north, and I got sick. There's been a lot of people in my neighborhood that got it because it was a beautiful night. People were out walking the night of that burn. But just south of here, you know, in some of the suburban areas, a mile away or so, there is so many people who've been on the news complaining that they got really like chemical burns in their nose and ears and things. So there was some, you know, some bad exposure.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting that you're 25 miles away and experience these toxic effects. 25 miles away, and when they did the burn, they only evacuated 1 square mile. That's crazy to me. They had to know that this was going to travel. That toxic plume, it has to go somewhere.
Well, a lot of the particles in that were heavy. There was a heavy ash that came down. It was like big potato chips floating down, and people went out and collected it, put it in jars, and that fell up to 5 miles out, as far as I can tell. So no one's even testing that ash. No one's even making an effort to go in just north of East Palestine to test what fell out of the cloud. That stuff is horrible too. They're testing the water, but they won't test what landed on the ground.
Yeah, that would seem to be a priority, if you ask me. Like, you want to know what effects it's having on the ecosystem.
Yeah, it's getting into the water. It's blowing around. And they say that when you burn polyvinyl chloride, you get dioxins. And the EPA is refusing. They are flatly refusing over and over again to test for dioxins. Dioxins, that's a common chemical that results from burning polyvinyl chloride. And it's extremely dangerous. And it's very persistent. It takes like up to 200 years to get out of the soil. And so we don't know if it got into, the general water supply. We don't know anything. And the people north of East Palestine, under the plume, have a right to know.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
There's just nothing from the government to tell us what came out of that cloud.
It's crazy. And like I said, it seems to me to be like this whole thing is a system-wide failure. I'm going to be doing my best trying to, especially the Ohio EPA, like, where are you at? What are you doing? What are you doing to help this situation? And, give us some answers here. That's the least that they could do.
Yeah. And they're really dragging their feet.
Yeah. And I kind of want somebody from the Ohio EPA to explain to me how tens of thousands of fish could be killed in the local waterways, but it's still safe for residents to live there. How do you know that? This doesn't make sense.
Well, so far there's been no acknowledgement from the government or any officials that there were fish kills in ponds north of East Palestine. So,
interesting.
The last thing they're so busy fighting, with the East Palestine town issue, they don't even want to think about looking, into the countryside north of East Palestine.
Yeah, because then they're going to have 27 towns to deal with that are all having issues from this toxic spill, not one.
Hey, Can I say one thing? I want to say something about the people.
Sure.
And this is important to me because I'm one of them. I get along down there pretty well. East Palestine and surrounding towns of the same size are all bedroom communities of Pittsburgh. So when COVID hit, so many people moved into that area.
Yeah, get out of the city. Yeah.
So, and it's always been that area has always been kind of touristy. So there's breweries, there's coffee shops, there's art galleries. It's got that cool town feel. All those towns are like that. So I don't, you have the LGBTQ community, people who, work at the coffee shops and the breweries and things like that, the art galleries. So they're not a bunch of, Trump-loving rednecks. Oh, you got them everywhere. I mean, there's a lot of Trump lovers,
yeah.
A lot of conservatives and farmers. But I think that people are getting kind of a bad rap because it's a diverse community. You got people from all over the world. It's always been like an immigrant area. So it's so strange to see the media portray them as like bitter, angry, white Trump lovers. You know what I mean?
Well, I got to put a spin on it somehow to, explain away the failure of the whole. I would say that's a Biden administration failure. Just the way that this was handled was absolutely ridiculous. And like I said, I'm going to do my best, especially with the Ohio EPA. If I'm halfway to, if I have to drive there in person with my call logs to ask why no one can call me back, I'm going to do that, and we'll see what happens. It's a lot harder for them to ignore me when I'm knocking right on their office door.
Hmm. Well, that's what it's going to take. And the thing is, the people of East Palestine, they're not in a position to do it. They're too beat up right now. And that's why I'm talking to you right now, because I'm pleading for help that we get some outside sources, independent sources to come in and look at this, and help, because it's just tough, and, like I said, and it's slowly getting worse, and we need help.
Yeah, well, I'm going to do everything that I can do, and the least I can do, I think, as any kind of a media person could do, is at least talk about it, try to raise some awareness, because it's just a dead zone out there. There was a little bit of initial coverage, mostly from a political lens, right? But it seems like, I would think that this story is important enough, and the long-term health effects to all the residents in those towns and surrounding towns, not just in East Palestine, is important enough that we should be hearing news. Is it safe? Is it safe for the town next to East Palestine, the town 2 towns over? What's have you tested the water? Is there more fish dying? Are people's pets still dying? Are people still being hospitalized? It's like we're not getting any news of any of this, or very, very little,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so frustrating, because, like, right now, I'm in a network of people, and we're sharing information. What's the latest reports, all this kind of stuff. And there's so much good information from good sources that we find that is just being ignored by the media. I mean, part of the problem is a lot of this information is complicated, and it's hard for the news to translate it to the public. So, there's a lot of issues, like compounding issues, where maybe the media does want to inform the public, but they don't know how to. It's a tricky situation. It's complicated. There's so many factors. There's science, there's greed, corporate malfeasance,
Yeah, and political power as well, because I know for a fact that rail company did donate quite a lot of money to the Republican Party, but I would bet you that they play both sides of the fence and have donated money on the other side of the aisle too. So there's some pressure there, and we can see this with this huge rush to, let's hurry up. We got to get this rail running. We got to get the railroad up and running again. We'll worry about the health risks later and the liability for this terrible environmental disaster we created. We'll worry about that later. Right now, we have shipments. We have to get the trains running. It's just a lack of any sort of human compassion. I wonder if those railway executives would feel the same way if that train was going through their backyards where their families live.
Well, today there was a Senate hearing, and the CEO of Norfolk and Southern had to testify before the Senate. That just happened. It was kind of a surprise. I was dissatisfied by what I heard from our local Senator Ruley. He's familiar. He's from that area. This is where he has his big family grocery store, and the things he had to say, because people asked him those very questions. These toxic materials are still running, and there's no safety. He just I'm not even sure exactly what he said, but he sounded really mealy-mouthed to me. about it.
Yeah.
I mean, he should be coming out with some strong language and directives. He wasn't.
Yeah, if I was in charge of that hearing, I would have got her from those creeks where all the fish died and asked them to drink it if everything's so safe, you know?
Yeah.
That's what I would have done, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been, and at the same time, we have to go around living, trying to make our daily lives, make our daily bread here,
Mm-hmm.
with that in the back of our minds. And, I had a doctor appointment last week. I got one this week. I can't afford to be running to the doctor and stuff like this.
Yeah, man. Even the copays. Some people have $50 copays, so that might be $100 out of pocket for you for 2 doctor's visits. That's not fair. It's not your fault. You didn't create this situation. Why should you lose money out of your own pocket because of the greed of some, I hate to say it, but they are like an evil corporation to me at this point. Everything that's wrong with capitalism. And by the way, I have no problem with capitalism, but I don't like crony capitalism, and I don't like evil capitalism. When you're willing to just throw away an entire town's health for profit, that's a problem with capitalism right there. The fact that they could even get away with, putting at risk an entire town or state's, health, it says a lot about how broken the system is.
Yeah, and I really hope that this is just a one-off situation. And I hope that this is not a sign of some kind of deeper rot in the system. Because if it can get this bad here, it could get this bad anywhere. I mean, what if this happens in a big city? Like that train almost made it to Pittsburgh. This could have happened in Pittsburgh. It was about 30 miles, 25 miles away from the outskirts of Pittsburgh. If it had gotten into Pittsburgh, what a horrific, there would have been there would have been hundreds of people dead.
Yeah.
It could have been just an unimaginable disaster. And those bomb trains are still running through the cities as we speak. They're flying through the cities at high speed on bad equipment, bad rails, bad sensors.
And brakes from 1890. Don't forget the brakes from 1890.
Sure. Yeah. Antiquated system carrying this high-tech explosive liquid.
Yeah.
It makes no sense. I mean, I feel like this is some sort of new form of terrorism or something.
Yeah, I don't know. I agree with you. Yeah.
Bombs through towns like this.
Yeah, and they got to think too of the safety. We talked about the safety issues, like, if you were some sort of radical terrorist and you were looking for a way to like really cause a lot of damage and kill a lot of people, there's a way right there. I mean, you're right. These things are crisscrossing our country. There's very little security. There's very little safety protocols or procedures. It's a powder keg waiting for a spark right now.
That's part of my personal anxiety, is that where is this going to happen again? Not is it going to happen again, but when and where. I've grown up on railroad tracks my whole life. Trains are everywhere. And, here I am, like I said, 25 miles away, and I was affected. So nobody's safe. Here's the thing. Nobody's safe in this country. If you're within 20 miles of a railroad track, you're not safe.
Yeah, well, I am. A lot of us are, yeah. And
part of the crazy thing about this is that they said that when those chemicals were burned, because of the varying conditions of the atmosphere, it could have turned into many different types of chemicals, all of which are highly dangerous in unique ways. So it was a boiling chemical stew of the most dangerous, craziest substances ever created by man, just blowing through the air.
Yeah, and then they burnt it on purpose, you know?
Well, you know, a lot
And
of people,
hey, I was going to ask you a final question here. We're coming up on time, but you know, having studied some environmental science, wasn't there a better way to deal with this spill than to just, you know, hey, we're just going to blow it up and burn it all? Wouldn't there be some better form of containment that they could have used?
well, that's the scary part because there is none.
Oh, great.
Apparently, when there's an accident as bad as this one, they have no choice but to blow it up like they did. And that's a best case scenario. Apparently, there's no good way to, here's the problem, that polyvinyl chloride boils at 7 degrees Fahrenheit. So it immediately turns into a gas as soon as it hits the air. And that gas just spreads everywhere. Should a spark hit that, it turns into a huge fireball. So, like what they did, you know, they dug these 2 huge pits and pumped the chemicals out of the cars into the pit as fast as they could, filled them up, and lit it with flares. And that's the best you can hope for in this situation. Like they shouldn't even be hauling this stuff.
Yeah.
Because there's no good solution when one of them derails. I mean, there are situations where if they get a rescue car in there quick with all the pumps and everything, they could take care of it. But like in the wreck we had, there was just too much debris. There was just really no way to manage the chemicals in those cars. And the temperature just kept going up and up. You know, I think what happened is some kind of chemical reaction started happening in one of the cars. And the temperature was rising too fast. If it had exploded, it would have destroyed most of that town. Just that one car.
Yeah.
And see, that's the problem, is when it turns into a gas, that's where you hit, that's where the real danger comes in. So since they were able to burn it as a liquid, it sort of mitigated some of the effects of it going into a gas, from what I understand, you know, from listening to some people, some experts talk about it. I mean, but then again, I've heard so many different stories too about how the burn played out and why it played out like it did. I'm not even sure exactly what the true story is.
Okay. Yeah. Who knows? Maybe someday we'll find out. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to give us some insight into the whole situation, especially from somebody that's, you know, local. It's so much better than me just, you know, sharing news reports and things, you know. And please keep me informed. Let me know if your health improves, and you know, or if you have further problems. And you did send me a lot of materials, which I will share with the audience. So I appreciate that as well.
Okay.
All right. Thanks very much, Jason. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate your efforts.
Now, you may be wondering why the EPA or government isn't doing more and seems to be doing everything that they can to lessen the culpability and blame for Norfolk Southern. But when in doubt, follow the money.
Supposedly he's got a lawyer with $25,000 in a brown paper bag.
Follow the money.
What do you mean?
Oh, I can't tell you that.
Is there any wonder then why Norfolk Southern continues to operate in ways that may endanger public safety, not just now, but for some communities, years and decades into their future with these environmental hazards that they let loose? And if you think they may have learned from their mistakes and are doing things better now, you'd be 100% wrong. At the beginning of March 2023, Another train derailed in Ohio. This time, it was caught on dashcam video. Did they not review safety procedures after the East Palestine derailment? Did they not strengthen their own commitment to not letting this happen again? Apparently not. The CEO of Norfolk Southern has a lot of words for us. Words like, doing everything we can. Empty promises like, we're working hard to make improvements. Actions speak louder than words. Why is a company being allowed to operate like this? Again, I think we just need to follow the money. If you were in a position of power or authority over this company, would you stand up and do the right thing? Would you stand up and do the right thing if the company just handed you a bag of money? And by bag of money, of course, I mean campaign or charitable contributions. All very legal, but still very corrupt. The long-term effects of this disaster won't be known for some time. More and more information is coming out now, and the original narrative that we were all spoon-fed is crumbling. Let us know in the comments here if you want us to dig deeper into this story. Should we continue to investigate this one? Let us know in the comments. Until next time, friends, my name is Stephen Cambion. Good night, and God bless all of you.
Truthseekers is a viewer-supported show. Wonderful people like you who enjoy this show send pledges in the form of super chats, super stickers, super thanks, PayPal, or Cash App. Instructions for how to help are in the description. You can also join our Patreon, and for as little as $1 a month you can get extra content. Patreon supporters get a backstage pass, early access to all our production videos before they are distributed publicly, Stephen Cambion's music, private writings, a monthly show journal, and more. You can also become a YouTube channel member for $5 a month. A YouTube membership includes all of the Patreon benefits, plus a special members badge, priority reply to video comments, and the live chat, plus a monthly members-only video. We thank you all, kind and generous benefactors, for supporting Truthseekers. Thank you for your generosity and support. Thanks for being here. This is Truthseekers with your host, Stephen Cambion. Please rate, like, and comment on our videos or podcasts. If you are listening to an audio podcast, please rate us 5 stars to help us rise in the search rankings. If you are watching on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. If you're listening to an audio podcast, we love and appreciate you listeners, but you are missing the live tapings. All our shows are recorded live with video feed. We'd love you to come be a part of our live broadcasts and tapings for the podcast. Head on over to YouTube, click the search tool, the little magnifying glass, put Truthseekers, one word in the search bar, and hit enter. You'll see a strange and mysterious guy with sunglasses. That means you found the channel. Go there, smash the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell to receive up-to-date info on our YouTube channel. We welcome you to be a part of our live taping and our chat room during the live broadcasts. Seek the truth. Speak the truth. This is Truthseekers. Truthseekers.